Right, hey guys, how are we doing? Back on another video from Totally Not Mark. We are continuing with this Hunter x Hunter review. We are on his 4th review, covering the second half of the Yorknew arc, and I absolutely loved this. I absolutely loved it. It's definitely the best so far. Obviously, for me, the Chimera Ant arc is like the best arc of all of it. But yeah, like, let's see what Totally Not Mark has to say on this, shall we? I just ran upstairs, I'm knackered. I'm getting too old. Amazing.
This is easily the best arc so far, and one thing that stuck out to me as being particularly amazing concerning this arc and, well, the entire series really, is how much is conveyed through subtext or through dialogue implicitly.
Right.
Now, these words might sound boring, but trust me, it's actually...
Whoa, they explain things through words!
Like today. Everything in this manga, Hunter x Hunter, is driven by character,
the Phantom Troupe.
Naturally from one scene to the next. Nothing feels contrived, and as a result, this arc held my interest and attention and never
oh my god, when Chrollo fights the Zoldyck.
The time has come for me to finish this incredible arc in the only way I know how, by giving you all my first impressions of, thoughts on, and blind review for the mysterious, the compelling, and the gritty Yorknew City.
Yeah, man. Yes. Absolutely mental when you see their abilities in that. Chrollo's so cool.
So remember the cliffhanger I left things on in the last episode?
Yes. Run away!
Yeah. Well, somewhat interestingly, this arc didn't at all proceed or conclude in the fashion I thought it would.
No.
Unlike most shonen that more often than not focus on action, predominantly towards its latter sections, this story had a surprisingly sparse amount of it. Though, with that said, it most definitely did have some, and
oh my god, when it did, my god.
Fantabulistic. A word I just made up now to effectively convey my enjoyment of it.
Oh.
And I will most definitely be talking about the
Chrollo versus the Zoldycks is so good.
Plot side of things, as it's unfolding after the boys get apprehended, a happy surprise I was greeted by almost immediately was how interesting and fun the Phantom Troupe happens to be.
Yes.
There's a tremendous effort from Togashi in this material to communicate and perhaps more importantly, characterize various members of the troupe.
Yeah, you do get a feeling of how they do work together in that, like a family kind of thing.
Morals, wants, and even goals. Whether it be the calm but cool Nobunaga, by the way, has a name that, for whatever reason, without fail, reminded me every time I read it, what have I got?
Crash Bandicoot.
Aku makes in Crash Bandicoot. In addition to him, there's the creepily upbeat and
that's quite funny.
The sinister Phaeton and the level-headed Paku among
she's
others.
boss.
By the time I reached the end of this arc, I was fully familiar with all of these colourful characters, and yet, oddly enough, despite receiving most of the focus and dialogue perhaps in this entire section, their leader, Chrollo, still feels like an enigma to me.
Still quite mysterious, isn't it? Yeah.
The opening scene sports
I like that, yeah, because you're like,
Paku, one of the Phantom Troupe, possesses the ability to read their minds once they are asked a question. Unsurprisingly, they try to ask about Kurapika, but interestingly, as has been made evident throughout this story by them consistently referring to him as, quote, Chain Dude, they actually don't have any idea what his real name is, and as a result, Gon and Killua legitimately have no idea who they're talking about.
Yeah,
I swear, the tension
it's brilliant. It's like, wait, they just need to say the right thing, and then
whether it be that exchange trying to get information out of them, or Gon's naive expression when he sees Hisoka chilling out with the group, made all the more sweet by Killua effectively finding a way to hide that fact by pointing out that the girl sitting next to Hisoka was the one Gon beat in the arm wrestling contest. Little decisions and workarounds like that made this scene flow perfectly and maintain a tremendous tension throughout. However, with the conclusion of this fun scene, it became very clear what the troupe's goals currently are. To make sure that these two boys don't escape and eventually meet Chrollo, and for the troupe to get revenge on the Chain Dude for killing.
The Chain Dude must die.
Are probably my two favorite scenes from this opening section. The first is an obvious one, and is Gon and Killua's escape from the watchful eye of Nobu. Stuck with seemingly no way out and taking the lead on this, Killua readies himself to give up his life for the sake of his friend, but Gon never one to give up, amazingly repurposes the information he learned from earlier in this very arc concerning the forgery of antiques in order to escape this particular situation.
Clever stuff.
Again, this is a nice callback, but it once again highlights a fundamental struggle for Killua's character. Despite wanting to give up on his past to move on from his family, those habits he learned there still
lingering. Yeah, it's quite difficult to get rid of, isn't it? His instincts are to just run away from danger, aren't they?
Apart from sacrificing himself. Now, that's a great scene, and I don't want to take anything away from it, but that's only one of the two best parts of this first section. The second part, I think, is a lot better.
My friends call me boss. Yeah.
So, this is a super interesting turn of events for a few reasons. First of all, we haven't really had a chance to see what sort of charisma or personality Chrollo brandishes. Secondly, there's this implication that he's now after effectively kidnapping the mob boss's daughter.
Yeah.
And thirdly, he possesses the ability to steal
Other
other Nen
yeah,
users'
my god.
abilities. Meaning, once he gets his fortune from Neon, he'll be free to use his fortune-telling ability to predict other people's future, and good lord, the reaction that he had to his own future's fortune was unexpected, to say the least. After all the talk about Chrollo and all the outlandish or extreme characters we've met in the troupe thus far, one thing that's really surprised me about him has been how meek and calm he appears outwardly.
He's very calm afterwards, yeah.
His choice was made to enhance the contrast once he does eventually start fighting.
Oh god, yes.
He's an absolute beast.
He is a monster, man.
We haven't really had that much of a chance to
Absolute
see Chrollo
monster.
perform or interact with many people thus far in the story. But that's about to change, for with every decision he makes, every sentence he speaks, or order he gives to his subordinates, it offers us as an audience a deeper insight into the warped mind of this chaotic and terrifyingly composed individual. Take, for example, the order he gives to the troupe to make a show of themselves. On top of the destruction they inflict,
Just go mad, yeah.
Disastrous with plenty of casualties, it's not the bombastic destruction that receives a big page spread in the manga. It's by no means the chaos that receives the focus from this sequence. Instead, it's the looming presence of one
Chrollo just watching over everything, yeah, it's like, whoa.
Loving every single second of what transpires beneath him.
The chaos. He is conducting it, there you go, yeah.
For an unwitting and defenseless society. And in the manga, this page is laid out specifically to draw attention to his hands to create that comparison.
That's cool.
I love that. Furthermore, this blitz by the troupe on the city is chilling and graphic in its depiction of the troupe's
It just shows how absolutely, like,
and
insane they are as a team.
It also offers a much greater insight into the individual members that we've all heard speak and bounce off of each other conversationally, but now we get to see them fight together.
Yeah, they are one hell of a team.
Are some truly chilling throwaway lines like Shalnark saying that his toy broke, referring to a grown man being
That he's
manipulated by
controlling,
him,
yeah.
dying horrifically in the process.
My toy broke off.
It's a great and effective set piece to familiarize ourselves with what I assume will be their main obstacle in the material to come, and to give us more reason to hope that our heroes can pull off the victory here. Now, obviously, all of this is happening outside, and as I mentioned in the last video, Zeno and Silva, Killua's patriarch figures, are both being hired to take out Chrollo. I mean, it makes perfect sense that the mob would have a retaliation of some description to this disaster and destruction, and a response they most definitely deliver. These are two super...
But then didn't Chrollo hire someone to kill the people that hired them, so then when they're dead, they have no point in fighting him anymore? Is that how it works? I'm trying to remember, it's been a while.
Would be a massive understatement. Silva and Zeno versus Chrollo. It's finally time for the Zoldyck family patriarchs to shine. Killua's father and grandfather. Having only seen a glimpse of his father in the prior short-lived arcs, it's sort of surreal getting to see them strut their stuff now, finally. And going into this, I was curious to see how capable they really were compared to a force we've been getting to know for the duration of this arc. And interestingly, before the fight begins, they actually give a lot of security personnel time to vacate the premises.
Yeah, it's like, leave!
They don't seem to hold any malice or indifference towards life. They seem to value it, which is kind of surprising given their line of work. And given that they're approaching a character that can steal powers, I think that's pretty interesting. From a visual standpoint, the flow of these panels in the battle between the three of them are handled masterfully and flows perfectly. At one point, I even felt as though the panels were actually moving, something I had
that does look cool. I like it.
Dragon Ball's manga. There's a soft but tense intense nature to the beginning illustrations, particularly on this extremely detailed rendering
Whoa.
of Chrollo's face, that without delay shatters into a dramatic and frantic typhoon of combat matched perfectly by the sketchy line nature of the drawings, purposely selling the intense panic of the situation. But what I found interesting about this sketchy, frantic nature of drawing is that the speed and power of their movements is offset by the respective composed facial expressions.
He's smiling, man. He's loving it.
In other words, I love how this scene is handled. I mean, Mr. Zoldyck uses a single strand of his hair to prevent a knife he was stabbed from poisoning his entire body.
Sick.
Which is just one of those shonen tough guy acts that I can't help but laugh at.
Yeah, it's always like, what?
Also, another thing, Chrollo mentions that 1/10 of a milligram of this particular poison is enough to paralyze a whale. Which, okay, how does he know this?
Yeah,
Is
so he
a
tested it.
scientist, a marine biologist? Does he go around measuring what effects this poison has on the biggest creatures he can find? I mean, if that's true, I mean, it's
That's funny because RDC World did that, how poison uses work. It's like, this is enough to knock out 10 rhinos. Why? How'd you know? I tested it. Surely one rhino's enough.
Despite this, the grandfather Zeno, while lagging behind in those departments, still acts as a great support player for Silva, all the while brandishing a cunning and perceptive personality as he breaks down what sort of nen Chrollo's power system stems from. And by the way, the respect shown between this father and son is honestly frightening, with Zeno saying that at one point as he pins him down that Silva should land the killing blow on Chrollo, even if it kills him. And without hesitation, Silva accepts
They just go. Yeah, it's like, alright.
That I realized this fight is doing more for these characters than an expository conversation ever could. There's just so much substance and meaning that colors the choices and actions carried out through this sequence. And speaking of colors, after seeing both the 2011 and 99 versions of this fight, I have to say that the fight was handled perfectly fine in 2011, but the classic 99 version delivered some of the best animation and storyboards I've seen from this entire series so far.
Interesting.
And really, the 1999 version of this anime has been firing on all cylinders for the entirety of this arc. And even as it reaches its climax, it does so by being true to the characters in question. With us privy to the
Does look
strengths of
good.
both Zeno and Silva, we observe that Zeno figures out the abilities of Chrollo faster than Silva, all the while Silva attempts the finishing blow.
This was really good for later as well because, like, having this fight, you know that if they just pop up anywhere, it's a big deal. It's like in the Chimerant arc, when he just pops up, it's like, oh yeah, okay.
This ending to the conflict I absolutely didn't see coming, and once again it's a character-rich moment that does a ton of legwork for the Zoldyck family. Mere moments before the conflict ends,
Get a phone call?
we see the aftermath of the strike landed by Silva as he receives a call from none other than his son, Illumi. What?
Oh my god!
Yeah.
Apparently, Illumi all of this time was contracted to take out all the Dons, and so with all of their employers now terminated,
Yeah, like, there's no
Silva
point.
and Zeno go
They're not getting paid
their
now.
way without finishing the job on Chrollo once again. It's all business as usual and nothing.
Yeah, I thought that was dead cool. I was like, alright.
It's a great way of preserving all of these characters in a believable way. It's just so good. And the best part of the Illumi sequence at the end is that it facilitates the progression of the auction as planned, thus furthering the story and leaving Kurapika to pick up the pieces as he views the doctored or set up crime scene where Chrollo's corpse lays. But something I think that's worth mentioning at this time was one of the starkest differences brought to my attention between the two animated versions.
Okay, here we go.
It should go without saying that I am trying to be as objective as I can,
Okay, yeah.
as fair as I can, but at the end of the day, it's really all subjectivity. It's down to my taste and your taste.
Definitely.
So please
Opinion
don't leave
based.
with the impression that
Yeah,
the 2011
chill. Let's
version
chill.
of the show is inadequate or isn't worth watching, as millions of people prefer this version or have nostalgia for it. It's great. With all of that said, however, I noticed that something seems to be somewhat of a trend when I compare these two versions, and that's how the respective anime adaptations try to capture a particular tone of a scene. After the fight reaches its abrupt ending and the auction concludes, Kurapika is shown walking carrying the eyes of his fallen clansmen. Now, even if I ignored that all the music used in 2011's version of this scene is laughable and does not at all match the tone of the scene, the visuals unfortunately do nothing for the scene either. Flat with strange textured shading and low detailed hair. And I understand that many people don't bother reading the manga or checking out older versions, and if this is your only exposure to this scene, then you might not notice, but I personally saw this right after reading the manga and seeing what 1999's adaptation did for the scene. Check it out.
Whoa. Oh, God.
Compare these by side, and
that is
hopefully you'll start to get a
intense.
sense of what it is that the 2011 version is missing in
Yeah.
these seasons.
Whoa. Oh. Yeah, that. Whoa. Soka, man.
So Kurapika's walking around carrying some eyeballs and all sorts of upset because these Phantom Troupe members seem to be dead, even though we as an audience know
We know they're not, yeah.
However, it did throw me off balance for quite a little bit while I was reading. Furthermore, the craziest thing about these guys is that they leave behind no sort of trail or breadcrumbs, no information to analyze about them, not even birth records, which apparently point them to being castaways from a certain place known as Meteor City.
Yeah.
I'm guessing that will come
We go back
later.
to Meteor City
This place accepts
briefly,
pretty
don't we?
much
Yeah,
anything
Chimera Ant arcs,
except
they...
anything being taken
Chimera
away,
Ants
which
invade
is
there,
an
yeah.
interesting precedent to set. I wonder if something will go there, and Gon will try and take it back, but he won't be able to. I feel like that's what they're setting up, but not 100% sure. But yeah, these apparently are the only rules that this place abides by, and thus the search for their identity seems to be at a dead end. In other words, we are currently dealing with forgotten or unwanted children that later became adults who became assassins eventually. Which, I mean,
A family of assassins.
family group of sorts.
Assassins.
In other words, the Thema family continues to run strong in Hunter x Hunter. So strong, in fact, that even after Chrollo reveals that the spiders will lose half their numbers, they all assume that means that half of them will die. Which,
yeah.
again, made me think, well, okay, technically speaking, the poem never said anything about death,
Dying,
just
yeah.
that the spiders' group's numbers will be halved. In theory, someone or a bunch could just leave, too. It's an interesting stipulation, but also, like everything else in this story, is written in such a way that reveals, in this instance, the familial bond they all share. No one even entertains the possibility of betrayal, which tells us more about their bond than a simple explanation ever could. And this scene, as they read their fortunes and eventually piece together what they must do to reach their goals, Chrollo confronts Nobu and, in a way, tells him to give his life to protect the others that are more important to their operation. And as perfectly timed as I've come to expect from Togashi,
Hisoka.
Nobu agrees to lay down his life to change the prophecy. Hisoka betrays them all,
Hell yeah.
secretly leaking sensitive information to Kurapika about them. A large component that acts as the foundation.
Because Hisoka wants to fight Chrollo so bad.
His own conscience and sense of responsibility. There's so much negativity, hatred, and blood surrounding this poor character, who, as I mentioned in last week's video, has already shown us that he doesn't take any enjoyment out of hurting people, let alone ending their lives.
He just feels like it's a necessity. It has to be done, taking down the Phantom Troupe now.
Truly sweet moments. Finally, some happiness for Kurapika.
Yay.
Reuniting with Gon and everyone, he smiles for what feels like the first time in ages. The band is
Back together. Yeah, man.
However, once Kurapika meets up with everyone, he lets it slip that he's the chain dude they were speaking about, and because Killua's character is hella consistent, he freaks out and reprimands Kurapika for giving them that information, because he knows there's a girl on the Phantom
That can
Troupe
read their
team
minds, and now they's like, no, you've told us stuff, they'll know if they
all these
see
little
us.
moments and character consistencies. Whenever there's a potential combat situation or whenever he's dealing with a foe, Killua always seems to have his head screwed on for the next logical thing to do. Well, for the most part. He sometimes needs help from his friends.
Yeah.
With all that said, however, because of this development, the plan is to go on the offensive now. They still need that reward money for Greed Island. We then switch scenes to Chrollo dishing out all the troops' fortunes back at the hideout. I liked it, but to be honest, this was where I encountered something in the manga that I didn't like.
Okay.
And it's not the first time
Is it
this
the
sort of thing has
overuse of
happened
text?
in this material. With these sections offering tons for me to enjoy, like the insight it offers into the dynamics of the various troop members, and while also pulling double duty with some tasty dramatic irony with Hisoka being the traitor in the group. You know, it seems like a scene I should love unconditionally, and I almost would if it wasn't for Togashi's desire to overly explain something in a really clunky manner sometimes. I've spoken at length over the last month about how effective Togashi can be at serving up exposition in creative and seamless ways, whether it be through the decisions the characters make, what they say or don't say to each other, or even through their own desires. But this doesn't happen here. During this scene, Hisoka quickly replaces his fortune, thus hiding his true intention of trying to fight Chrollo, and this is a perfectly fine and creative situation using Nen, but Togashi, much like his explanation for how Hisoka dismantled Castro back at Heaven's Arena, is bogged down in so many specific
Lot of text. Yeah, I've seen a lot of complaints about Hunter x Hunter is the overuse of like text.
It feels like someone's lecturing me. these sort of explanations are
It's a
present
lot.
in a lot of
Like,
different
I've got
and stories
one of the later ones where they're on the way to the Dark Continent, is it? And some of those pages, man, it's like so much text.
Contains the properties of both rubber and gum, you see. I feel like this is one of those instances where less is more and he shouldn't need to hold our hands through everything.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, as I mentioned in the prior video, this was what I was worried about when Nen was explained. There are so many wonderful upsides to a more complex and involved power system like Nen, but this is just one of the seemingly inevitable downsides.
Yeah, like, you're gonna have to explain how these people are fighting each other with these abilities.
A ton of information onto the reader to act as an explanation. But yeah, that's probably the only instance where I thought the plot struggled during this portion of the arc, and it's all up to
Ahsoka's weird.
So, we're finally heading into the endgame of the story, and again, this breaks the tradition of normal shonen stories, in a sense. There's no earth-shattering or even city-shattering ramifications to this looming altercation between the two groups, but we are heavily involved because we know who's involved and what's hanging in the balance for them. It's gripping stuff. Kurapika explains his ability with the chains in detail to the guys, and together they make a pact, one that bonds them using his chains to a certain promise. It's sort of screwed up, but also kind of touching to see them as close friends yet again. Killua goes to scope out the place, but a bunch of Nen buildings have been erected by one of the troop, thus making them next
Yeah,
to
because you
impossible
can
to
copy
find.
stuff,
However,
can't you?
it's
Isn't
here
that the thing?
something interesting comes to my attention. Killua and Melody tail Chrollo's group, right? And during this scene, I thought it was fun to see how powerful Melody's hearing really was, and how the use of it makes her notice how quiet all of Killua's steps really are. She even asks if he's an assassin. It's an interesting character moment, and I honestly thought that was a really subtle but interesting piece of
Yeah, that's cool. I do like that.
Someone like Killua that has quite literally refused to follow in his father's footsteps still can't help but walk with them out of habit. And it's that sort of attention to detail that makes this a phenomenal series. I mean, earlier in chapter 107, there's a conversation between Gon and Killua, wherein Killua remarks that because the world thinks that these folks are dead, that there's no real point in continuing to pursue them, considering there's no reward so that they can get closer to Greed Island.
Yeah.
This interaction, I think it's a really easily missed moment, but it's one of my favorite interactions from the entire arc, and I'll tell you why.
Go on.
Because this line by Killua mirrors almost perfectly how his father and grandfather handled the Chrollo situation when they were facing him earlier in the arc, wherein they let one of the most dangerous men in the world go because it was just business.
Yeah, that is very much so. Yeah.
They had no incentive monetarily anymore, and this is exactly
It's been passed down to Killua as well. He's got that mindset.
However, unlike his father and his grandfather, Killua has a friend to help him to continue.
That's true, yeah.
Outside of
Gon,
business.
like, levels
These
him
are
out.
Dangerous people. They are going to do horrible things, and right now, it seems Gon has a plan to get the Greed Island game while still pursuing the Phantom Troupe in the first place. As mentioned prior, this arc really doesn't have impactful stakes that affect a large scope of people. In fact, the scope is remarkably small. And I say remarkably small because I really care. I'm invested. I want to see how Kurapika's story comes to a
oh my god, like,
I want to see Gon
it's so intriguing.
for the very first time. It's a long journey with plenty of unexpected twists and turns, and this is another one of them. With Gon and Killua both captured by the troop, the new plan becomes try to find a way to avoid too much information being leaked now that they know so much more
Yeah.
than they did last time. And this girl has the power to read minds with a single touch. So
I love how her story ends, man. She was class.
Killua and Gon now have no communication with anyone. Well, almost no one. One of my favorite characters had an elegant solution to this problem. Killua begins to whisper to himself, hoping that Melody hears him, and then, as if by magic, this happens.
My crotch! My crotch! Hey, has anybody seen my crotch lately? Little puke. One of these days I'm gonna catch you, and I'm gonna...
Yeah, Leorio just, like, distracts.
I love Leorio. And
Yeah,
I
he
don't
is cool.
use the word love very often, but this is such an
When he has moments, they're
solution
great.
to this unique problem. Nen is awesome, and now we have a plan. They will wait until 7, the power will cut, and then Killua will attack in the confusion. And the way this plan is laid out in the manga is honestly just beautiful. It's brilliant. I love the choice Togashi made to use the radio in the hotel lobby to act as a countdown of sorts to when the lights will eventually cut out. I love that we as an audience are made fully aware of the plan beforehand and therefore anticipate it all the more, thus raising the tension, particularly when the lady that can read minds touches them. It's amazing, and the small brawl that ensues after the lights cut is brilliant, with Killua acting like the monster he knows how to be by breaking her arm, all the while Gon follows up the attack with a massive kick to her face. And despite them being recaptured after the initial flurry, something comes to the attention of the group. Something really important. Chrollo has vanished amidst the chaos.
Oh
it's
dear.
a solution that facilitates this exact incident without the secret surrounding Kurapika being spread beyond this woman. For if she tells anyone, Chrollo dies. This arc really has just done so much for Kurapika.
Like, they've actually captured him. It's like, holy crap.
Of his persona, the determination he brandishes, the cold-blooded nature he is conducting the phone call with, and abducting Chrollo has been nothing short of stellar. It's incredibly cathartic watching as these spiders slowly figure out that Kurapika really does have them wrapped around his finger as he forces their hands and sends them all back to their hideout, leveraging Chrollo's life when utilizing Melody's power and luring the mind-reading girl to the desired location alone. There is one small issue, however. Chrollo isn't remotely unnerved.
He's not bothered whatsoever. I love that. It's like, whoa, what's he doing? Why?
Eventually, though, an exchange is made, and through this exchange, we actually get to see the discussions and arguments erupt amongst the troupe. These aren't putty monsters from Power Rangers or some random goons. These are all real characters, and
yeah, they all have like proper like stuff going on. They all stand out.
And approaches clash and respond to this unique situation was fascinating, reinforcing not just the bond between them, but with the audience too. They feel like a family. These are incredibly compelling characters, made all the more incredible in this arc's conclusion. Typically speaking, as a reviewer of
chills.
stories, I choose to read the manga first, as that's the primary source. It's the
yeah, it's the original. It's where it's originally wrote. Yeah, I get that.
For the scene. That's not to say I dislike anime. I love anime. I don't have anything against it, and I think it can be brilliant if done correctly. But just like anything else, it can be done incorrectly. Hunter x Hunter is in a rather unique position where it has been afforded by the anime gods 2 separate anime adaptations, and throughout this series I pointed to numerous instances where I felt like the anime failed to capture the true essence of certain scenes.
Yeah.
Whether that be down to the music, the animation implementation, or even the direction at times of the scene. And let me make something perfectly clear. Hunter x Hunter isn't the only story that this happens with. It happens with almost every anime. Even some of my favorites. Take this scene from Dragon Ball Z after Goku deals the finishing blow to Frieza. He looks down towards the crater with disdain. I mean, who doesn't remember that moment who's seen the series? It's a very iconic shot.
Very.
So anyone who's a fan of Dragon Ball would be very much familiar with that scene and think they understand what's going on here. Or so you would think if you only saw the anime.
Okay, go on.
You see, in the manga, this scene has one subtle difference. And this subtle difference changes the entire scene. In the manga, after dealing what he thinks is the finishing blow to Frieza, Goku is left with this look across his face. There's no disdain. There's not even really
It looks
anger.
sad.
There's just pity and sorrow.
Wow.
This is why reading the manga first is so important to me. It's just to get
Wow.
an accurate interpretation of
Yeah.
the events, and then I can look at the anime afterwards. However, there is an instance in this portion of Hunter x Hunter that I can't help but draw attention to and point as being absolutely incredible here and now. Throughout these last 4 videos, I've been comparing 2 separate adaptations as well as the manga. One from the 90s and early 2000s, known as the 1999 anime, and one from the last 10 years,
2011.
known as the 2011 anime. And this arc, this video, is where the older, crisp version of the show ends in a spiritual sense. But what an ending they deliver. There's a scene towards the end of this arc where, after delivering the kids back to Kurapika, Paku resigns herself to death in exchange for delivering unto her teammates the necessary information.
Yeah.
The manga's version is great, and 2011's is perfectly faithful to that, but 1999's version of this death scene is the most incredible of their adaptations in this series, bar none.
Okay.
This is what, in my opinion, any and every anime adaptation ought to strive for. The artwork and direction is top-tier stuff, taking precisely what made the manga scene great and elevating it to new heights using the strengths of this medium. It's chilling, it's emotional, and it left me with my jaw on the floor. It's stunning.
Wow.
Beautiful. It's as close to perfect as I can imagine a scene adaptation can be. Now, there's a little more.
Well, then
to this
Hisoka's
arc,
like, right, I'm out.
For someone to fight, but then realizing that he can't fight Chrollo, and eventually how we desert Chrollo on top of a mountain somewhere awaiting his crew. But honestly, it's near impossible to beat that scene with Paku. It's just so good, so I'm going to leave it with that scene.
I mean, I liked it anyway, but yeah, if you're saying it's done better, that's interesting, because you were saying as well that this is where it ends now, isn't it? That version.
The same without it moving forward in its current glory. And so, while with the closing closing of this video, I'll be closing the book on Yorknew City and starting my new journey on Greed Island next week. In this video, I'll also be closing the book on a tremendous adaptation of a phenomenal story. Capping off its run...
Yeah, it finished with Yorknew, didn't it? So we never, yeah.
Magnificent scenes I've ever seen in an anime. And just like everything else in this story, it's still ongoing. Gon's next objective is to acquire the Greed Island video game.
Greed Island is interesting. It's not terrible, but
as we catch up with this amazing story. That'll have to be left for next week.
I just don't think it's as good as all the other stuff.
If you enjoyed this series, let me know by leaving a like and a comment down below. See you all on Greed Island next week.
Cool. Because I was saying, it's weird, isn't it, that like that adaptation opened up with the scene with kites, but then it never actually got any further to have him in it. So that's really weird. You know, if you were just anime only. If you were anime only for that version, it'd be really weird seeing like Kite in the opening and then never seeing him. Whereas in the recent adaptation, they didn't have that in the beginning, and then Kite comes out of nowhere, and you're like, what? Yeah, it's really weird how they've done that. I like the Yorknew arc. Greed Island, I'm a bit... like, obviously I'm going to watch all the reviews. Greed Island, I feel like, is the weakest part. It's still good, had its interesting moments, and again, plays on the whole Nen thing quite well. And we get closer to finding Gon's dad. But yeah, I'll check that out, and I'm nearly up to finishing Skypiea arc on One Piece, so I'll be checking out his review on that. And yeah, thank you very much for watching, and thank you, I need to remember to do this now, thank you to my patrons. If you go to Patreon, in the link in the description, $1 a month, your name will appear at the end of every video. So thank you to my patrons right now. I think there's just one name on the list. But yeah, if you go there, I'm not asking for any more than that, $1 a month, and I'll put your name at the end of every video, and that'll help support the channel. And thank you guys very much for watching. Click like, subscribe if you haven't already, leave comments down below, let me know what I should watch and discuss in future videos, and I'll see you guys next time.